Well met, weary traveller. Come in and sit by the fire for a moment. Take up your flagon of ale or mead, and lend your ear. Let us regale you with the tales of bygone adventure and of the wisdom of ages. Or, just listen in while two dudes named Jeff and Jeremy talk a lot about role-playing games.
So, how about a D&D joke?
All right, let's hear it. Let's hear a D&D joke. I'm ready.
Okay, so a human, an elf, and a dwarf are all sitting in a tavern, lined up at the bar. And the barkeep has just poured each one of them an ale, and slid them over in front of them. And, defying all reason and logic, 3 flies come along, and plop, plop, plop. Each one of these flies lands in each one of these tankards. The elf looks at the fly in the top of his ale, slides it away in disgust. The human looks down, picks the fly out, tosses the fly onto the floor, kind of shrugs, and then starts drinking his ale without any further thought. The dwarf, very, very, very carefully, reaches in with 2 fingers, picks the fly up, gingerly and carefully, and he holds him over the tankard, and he says, "Spit it out, you little bastard! Spit it out!"
Jesus Christ.
That was probably my favorite D&D joke.
Yeah, it's pretty good. This catches all of those nice little tropes just right in a row.
Exactly. Because dwarves like to drink.
You
Get it?
I'm just surprised you had a D&D joke just ready and waiting, just like right off the bat.
Oh man, jokes are one of my favorite things. I love jokes. It's one of the greatest things about jokes is that they're short stories, if you tell them right.
Yeah.
And it's such great practice for doing exactly what we do, playing games. It's learning how to pace your story in little bits here and there, and then give the payoff at the end and make it all seem worthwhile. How to wrap an audience around your finger. So,
yeah, there is kind of a strange, tension especially during like a formal joke like that, where you started off with here's a joke. Of
yes.
Just that wind up of okay, where's this going? Okay. We've established some characters, there's something happening here. Where is this gonna go? And what's the dramatic payoff?
And I say jokes are a short story, but truth be told I have sat through more than one joke, sadly enough, during my time in the Scouts, where the joke, the telling of the joke lasted probably around an hour.
Oh God.
And it's one of those ones where the punchline comes, and the whole point of the joke is the fact that you've sat there and listened to the whole thing, and that the punchline is not rewarding. So it's just
The punchline is just the sadistic joke teller's amusement,
yes.
And the fact that you sat there and listened to his rambling story for countless time.
Yes, absolutely. And it's one of those things where if I were a violent person, the punchline might become a very apt title. Yeah.
Oh God.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so. I don't understand the lengthy jokes. In some sense, I get it. I get it on a fundamental level, but why? Who sits there and wrote that out? Someone had to have made that joke. Unless they were just improvising some ridiculous story, which is totally possible.
I have done that as well. There's actually a story that I told several of the younger guys who would ride in my vehicle about the time that a bag of empty Doritos, or an empty bag of Doritos saved my life. And it was just this, I think it was an hour and a half long car trip that we were taking to wherever we were camping. And I just improv the story for pretty much the entire time. And it's one of those things that's kind of lived on in infamy with some of the guys that I still play with now.
Like, oh god, remember that time Jeremy told that Dorito story?
Yep.
Oh jeez.
There's been a couple of times that they've actually asked me to tell it again, or obviously a different version of it, and I'm like, I just don't really have that in me right now. That's a commitment, an hour-long improv. That's not easy to do.
That is definitely not easy to do. Like, I'm all fine and dandy for improv. It's like one of my favorite things to do, either in tabletop or music or just in general. But once someone's like, all right, do something off the top of your head for an hour, like,
by yourself.
Serious respect
No
to
less.
some people who can do that. Like, some people are freaking ridiculous.
Oh yeah,
Just like going on and on and on.
yeah. I
like,
fully believe that that Robin Williams probably could have been in a room by himself and would have kept going. I think people could have got up and left the room and he wouldn't have even noticed.
Yeah, I could just put him in a room with a camera and just hit record and just say, all right, just talk for a few hours. We'll be back eventually, and then we'll watch this back, and it'll be like the funniest thing anybody's ever seen.
He was a damn funny human being, that was for sure. Despite whatever he may have been wrestling with.
Yeah, I mean, to get deep, if I may, it seems to be a pretty common thing with creative people, and even especially comedians, somewhat ironically, where, like, some of the funniest things are kind of being vulnerable in a way that people don't expect. And, like, oftentimes that requires you to go through difficult things that'll weigh on you. So it's like, you see these, like, all the time, these stories of these comedians who are just, like, hysterical people, and you find out they're just, like, riddled with depression and anxiety and self-doubt and, like, all that stuff.
Yeah, and a lot of comedians, some of their best material comes from this, I don't know about objective, but kind of this outside look at the absurdity of life.
Yeah, exactly.
The things that happen to us on, a fairly regular basis, or are at least somewhat universal, because otherwise the comedy doesn't sell. It has to be recognizable. And they take it, and it's usually something that is, like you said, something that's, bad about life, or that is sometimes even tragic, and they put a spin on it that makes it humorous, which helps us as people. It's kind of cathartic to laugh in the face of things that are normally troubling. But I think they sometimes just have, a way of looking at it that is funny, but I think the comedy of it can only float on the surface, and at some point you have to deal with the undercurrent of all of those emotions, of all of those topics.
Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, you can tell it to other people in a way that's funny, but if it's not something that you've actually, like, dealt with, it can still take you down.
Sure. And I mean, even people like, Carlin. I mean, Carlin was razor sharp, but
oh yeah,
he had this deep-seated cynicism, and the older that he got, it took over his comedy. And it wasn't that it wasn't funny any longer. It's just, it stopped being an undercurrent to his comedy, and it was very in the foreground of his comedy, and you could tell that it was bothering him, that it was eating at him as a human being. But
yeah, I mean, there's only so, like, cynical you can become before, like, it starts to, like, degrade you as a person, where, like, you become so resentful of the world and all its tragedies that, like, poking fun at it, while it can be hilarious for yourself and for other people, like, if you don't deal with that in the right way, eventually it'll just continue to degrade you, and maybe your jokes will still be on fire, but, that only goes so far if the rest of you is, like, crumbling into nihilism.
right, yeah, it becomes kind of a duality. You know, you have this inside thing that you're dealing with, and you put up this facade on the exterior that you're, like in the case of Robin Williams, that you're expected to put forth. You know, you've built your entire brand, you know, your entire image on this specific presence, and you have to bring it. So I imagine that weighs pretty heavy on a person after a while.
Yeah, and I mean, it's a real shame that, like, we kind of hold those people to, like, the image that we had of them, where basically it forces them to put up these personas. And, like, I think for most people, like, what can be so healthy about comedy is the fact that you can say your true thoughts because you're presenting in a way that's funny and lighthearted. And you don't have to put up a persona. You can, like, allow the real you to shine forth just in this way that's amusing to people. So I think once you kind of have to bottle up that part of you that's real and keep this persona up, like, it can be really harmful for yourself. And I think it kind of it does a disservice to yourself and your audience when you have to hide parts of yourself because of expectations. Because it's like the reason that they liked you so much in the first place is because you didn't do that. And it's like, you know, maybe you'll let people down in the short term, but, you know, the real fans, if you want to use the word fans, or at least the real people that know you will be able to see through and appreciate the realness instead of the persona.
Yeah, it's a very good point. Yeah, humor is a really good way of stalling, dealing with heavier emotions. Not deflection, but just I just lost the word, but, you know, stalling.
Yeah, it lets you approach them in a way that might not be so daunting. Like,
yeah, for sure.
If something terrible has happened and the only thing you can do is just bear the full weight of the darkness, like, it can be incredibly damaging. And, like, unless you're, like, a really strong person, emotionally speaking, like, it can very well swallow you if you're not careful. But if you can kind of break it down into humor, at least during that initial kind of shock stage or troubled stage, it kind of lets you talk about it without dealing with it. Not necessarily in a way that you're bottling it up to hide, but kind of just, it lets you kind of bridge that gap between, like, shock and being ready to talk about it in a normal way.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. My family is very much like that. My immediate family. We've just always been very... Comedy has just been a part of my growing up, you know. There's always been jokes in the house and a lot of levity interjected into even moments when other people would consider it inappropriate. And, you know, when my dad passed away 12 years ago as of yesterday, at the funeral, my brother and my sister and my mom and I were, like, we were cutting up and laughing. You know, we weren't like, you know, holding our sides, you know, rolling on the floor kind of laughing. But, you know, we're remembering funny moments from family vacations and, do you remember the time that Dad did this or said that? And that's just kind of the way that we, like you said, that we compartmentalized and dealt with a rather daunting amount of grief. You know, it kind of gives you the opportunity to chip it into smaller, more digestible pieces and kind of attack it with that humor, you know?
Yeah, exactly. It kind of lets you, like, get started on the process of dealing with that.
That was smooth, Jeff.
Did you like that?
That was
did you like that
very,
segue?
very smooth.
We totally ruined the transition by pointing it out, but I'm proud of that one.
I might have a little bit of a podcast nerd chubby now. That was that smooth.
That's how we do it.
There we
Hello,
go.
everybody. Welcome to Dudes of Yore podcast. I'm Jeff Doty, also known as Encounterbalance, on YouTube and in the Absolute Tabletop community. Yeah, this is our very first episode.
Yeah, man, I'm super excited about it. I am Jeremy Lilley. I'm also known as Erasmas in certain circles, and I have a YouTube channel as well called the Erasmus Expeditions. That's spelled Erasmas. Yes, I'm aware it's spelled incorrectly. It's done on purpose. But, man, yeah, I've been talking about doing this kind of thing for a while now, and it's been kind of rattling around in my head. And then I decided finally to get started. And in doing so, I kind of messaged you and said, hey, I've been thinking about doing this. Is it something you'd be interested in? And you were basically like, that's funny. I was thinking of doing so as well, and I was contemplating contacting you. So.
Yeah, it was kind of a strange twist of fate, really, because like I've been a fan of podcasts for like forever. Like I listen to stuff constantly, and like for like years now, probably like 2 or 3 years, I've like constantly had this thought of like, I want to do a podcast. Like I don't know that I'm ready right now as a speaker to do one on my own, but I want to do that. So like, let me try to figure out a way how. And then like, as I was kind of trying to work out some sort of process on what I wanted to do, like you just messaged me out of the blue.
I laid myself
like, hey,
at your feet.
How about? Yeah, so it just kind of all fell into place a little bit too perfectly.
Yeah. So, this is, like you said, it's our first episode, and we're going to be talking about getting started. You want to kind of fill people in on what exactly we're talking about whenever we say getting started?
Yes. So, this, of course, for most people watching this will probably know, this is a podcast that will be focused around tabletop RPGs. Particularly playing online is where at least I do most of my gaming. I know Jeremy has kind of got a mixed bag. But this first episode is going to be getting started. How do you go from somebody who's not currently playing in a game online, and how do you kind of go from that to somebody is in a game or a campaign?
This is not the podcast about stand-up comedy and dealing with grief.
My internet struck me down, and I was unable to get that statement out there in the public.
All right, so I'll repitch the joke here.
Okay, all right.
Ready?
It's always funnier when you do it the second time, right?
Exactly, especially if you have to explain it.
Yeah.
So okay, so you mean that this is not the podcast for stand-up comedy and dealing with grief? Because that's what I thought this was.
Well, I mean, we can make it about that if you want to. In fact, actually, let's just
fine.
Tabletop RPGs have been talked about to death. Let's deal with our unchecked and hidden away emotions.
I think what
this
you did
is actually
there
now just a counseling session.
All right. No, that's I am very, very excited always to talk about gaming and RPGs in general. It's a favorite topic of mine, and it's one that I can talk at for stupid amounts of time, much to my wife's chagrin at moments. I will literally talk until she falls asleep sometimes.
Yeah, and we definitely have an opinionated bunch that we kind of work with on a regular basis in the tabletop world. So there's always a lot of interesting things for people to talk about, and it gets interesting sometimes. I guess is the best way to leave it.
Yeah, and that actually brings up a great point. Something that I want to establish with this podcast is there's going to be a lot of times where I'm talking about something and I'm giving my opinion about something, but I want to make it perfectly clear right now that anything that I say on this podcast is strictly my opinion. And I'm not one of those kinds of people that likes the implication of this is the way you need to do this, or this is something you should avoid doing with gaming. Obviously, you should never point a gun at your face. That's not really a role-playing game related tip. That one's for free. But
that's your life tip. Free life tip from Jeremy.
Exactly.
I appreciate you bringing that up. Yeah, my statements as well are absolute facts, and unarguable law. So make sure you listen closely to what I have to say, because it is the one truth and the one way to play tabletop RPGs, and there is no questioning any of my advice.
I can feel Sam shaking in his chair right now. I don't know if he's ever going to listen to this, but Sam de Mercurio? I'm going to try that again. Sam de Mercurio is who I'm talking about, and if he does listen to this, he's trembling right now.
Yeah, Sam likes his there's no right way, and everybody's way, as long as it makes them have fun, is the right way attitude.
Which I fully support.
And that's just complete bullshit. There is only one way, and that is the way that I'm going to tell you about. So, no, obviously, jokes aside, as Jeremy said, these are our opinions, and take them as you will. Give them a try if you want to, but at the end of the day, tabletop gaming is about finding out what works for you.
Absolutely. And by no stretch of the imagination am I an authority on any of this kind of stuff. You know, it literally has been trial and error, for me. I don't know, what do you think? Maybe on the topic of getting started, maybe we should talk about how we got started.
Yeah, that's a good point. Kind of give the origin stories, so to speak, of us in our gaming worlds. So let's hear the Jeremy Lilley tragic superhero origin story.
I was going to say, you hear that, everybody? Jeff said it. We're superheroes. It's official now. I expect Marvel's call by the morning.
Yeah. Do we get secret identities?
You don't have one?
We have to establish now.
You've been giving out.
How do you know Jeff isn't my secret identity?
I was going to say, you've been giving out your real name this whole time. You fool. No. As far as getting started, so my first experience with role-playing games was probably around 14, in the Boy Scouts. The man that was my scoutmaster actually taught me to play First Edition with several of the other scouts. And we played a couple of times a year, and it was a lot of fun. It was First Edition D&D, and I enjoyed it, but I didn't really understand what the game was really about until I got into college, and me and several friends of mine from the drama department at our community college started playing. We played every weekday, 5 days a week, for about an hour and a half between the end of shop class and the beginning of rehearsals. And if you've never played with theater people, you really should. It's a wholly different experience. And it was very much kind of the antithesis to what I had been doing. The rules were very lackadaisy, and it was all about character development, story development. And that's really where I fell in love with this hobby, where I developed a really deep passion for it. And when I was about 20, it was about a year, maybe a year and a half after playing in that group, I started my home group, where I was hosting at my house on a weekly basis. And we're still going strong, about 17 years in going now. So it's comprised of a bunch of friends that I still have from the Scouts, and contacts, like siblings and spouses and things from that core group of people. And we're actually playing again tomorrow night, so I'm super excited. What about you, Jeff? How did you get started in all this craziness?
So, the first time I ever played anything tabletop was as a kid. My dad had not grown up with the hobby, but he had played it with some of his brother and his friends, mm-hmm. and stuff like that. And as me and my brother got older, I was probably still only like 5 or 6, maybe 8 at the oldest. Mm-hmm. But he decided to try to introduce us into the hobby as well. Just as kind of a family activity between the boys in the household.
Sure.
And that was, I think it was 2nd edition. I'm pretty sure. I'm not actually completely positive because I had absolutely no grasp of the rules at the time. Like, we didn't really get too far into that. Like, my dad was the dungeon master, of course, and he kind of handled all of the mechanics and just kind of let us do things. And it wasn't anything super serious. It was just super casual, more like a board game, I'd say, than like a role-playing experience. But it got me interested in the concepts. I'm kind of interested in fantasy as a genre, and in role-playing games as a concept. And from there, I actually dip away from tabletop games for many, many years, though I had constantly been playing stuff like Baldur's Gate 2. Like, I've logged probably hundreds of hours on that game.
It's a great game.
It kind of bridged the gap for me between playing tabletop as a kid and kind of keeping the knowledge and interest of it alive, going into, and it wasn't until just a couple years ago when D&D 5e came out, that one of my friends out of nowhere was just like, hey, I've heard that there was a new edition of this game. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's called Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm kind of interested in it. And I was like, whoa, I remember playing that as like a kid. And like playing Baldur's Gate 2, and I loved doing that. So yeah, I'm super down to try it. And we kind of just gathered a group of our friends and started playing games. We would just have these like ridiculously long slogs of like 13-hour games on a Saturday, like just these crazy huge long slogs. And we played it mostly like mechanically, and we like barely really dove into some of the heavier roleplay stuff. And then I started kind of catching some of the online videos because I wanted to be better. You know, people like the AbTab guys, back before there was an AbTab group, kind of forming, trying to learn how I could be a better dungeon master, because I was running a campaign in the home group at the time, and just being a better player in general. And then that got me into the AbTab community, and as I kind of saw all these awesome games springing up, just playing in a way that I had never seen before, you know, games like The Provokers and things like that, where there's just this super in-depth RP, and there's incredible stories and character interaction, and like people were actually playing characters, not just playing a game, which was super fascinating to me. And then that kind of just brought me in, and I kind of got more and more jaded with my home group, where we had some people who were just unreliable. They would cancel like the night before. It's like, oh, actually, I can't go for no real reason in particular. And then we would run like 2-player games, and it was supposed to be 5, and so on.
Right.
Like, there's got to be a better way than this. So I started just earlier this year, about 9 months ago at this point. Jesus, it's been 9 months. Good God. Started playing more in the actual AbTab online games and getting more involved in the online community and playing games and running games. And that basically takes me more or less up until now.
Yeah. And it's just such a good group of people. You know, it's just...
Yeah, I'm
the amount of creativity
constantly blown
and
away
stuff.
by the... Yeah, just... Like... Playing D&D with my home group was like, it was like playing a board game, which, I mean, nothing wrong with that. It's super fun. Like, just doing anything with your friends in a collaborative way like that's going to be enjoyable, whether it's competition or D&D or whatever. But, like, playing with some of the people in these online groups, it almost feels like it, in some games, not all games, but some of them almost start to border on, like, art form, I would even say. If I can be as bold to say that. I can
agree to that. And it's, like, truth be told, our hobby is a game at its center, but it does require a certain level of commitment. If nothing else, then at least time. And I think that's probably the first barrier for a lot of people, is how much time it takes. And it's something that whenever I'm introducing new players to the game, that I try to be as frank and upfront about as I can. Because I know, especially in this day and age, where ADHD and ADD are so much more prevalent, and even people who don't suffer from ADD and ADHD, almost everybody has some kind of attention deficit issue. You know, it's just the kind of society that we live in. You know, you have a computer at your fingertips at all times. And it's distracting.
Yeah, I mean, like, I can't really blame them. Like, if you think about how long, even like online sessions, which usually tend to run shorter than home group sessions, you're still looking at like, on the short end, 2.5 hours. Average games will probably go more like 3.5 to 4, maybe even 4.5 if it goes a little bit long. It's like, how many people could you just walk up to on the street and say, "Hey, do you have interest and time to watch 2 movies back to back?" Like, that's a lot of time to ask of somebody in a row.
Yeah,
it's like
absolutely.
The fact that people are even willing and able to commit to a lot of the sessions that get played is impressive, to say the least, given the time of being an adult, the time it takes just to be an adult, and, like you say, attention span and interest, things like that.
Don't even remind me about having to be an adult. I did enough of that this week. So.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But no, it's a very great point, and I think it's different. At least for me, it is, because even still, like when I come across videos and I'm like, "Oh, this one's 4 hours long. Do I have time to sit down and watch this?" I don't know. But if I'm running or playing a game, that kind of time commitment to me is nothing.
Yeah,
and I think that comes with the level of investment. Because when you're playing in a game, when I'm running a game, my interest level is infinitely higher. And that's not knocking on anybody else's ability to run a game or as a player. It's just I don't have that initial buy-in, of, oh, this is my character, or this is a story that I put together, or what have you.
Yeah, there's kind of an initial point that you kind of have to jump off the diving board, but once you're in, like you say, as a player or a GM in a game, especially with a good group, like those minutes and hours just melt away.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I'm regularly kind of stunned by just games where it's like, whoa, it's been like 3 hours already. That like it felt like 1.
Yeah, I've had a couple of games like that where you look at the clock and you're like, oh, maybe we should actually roll some dice at some point during this game. I guess we should.
Anyways, kind of
do something.
Moving back towards the topic here of getting started. So let's say there's somebody who's I guess just the starting point is if you are looking to play online, particularly, that's where I'm most comfortable and where I do most of my gaming. There's a couple of groups you should probably join. The Absolute Tabletop official group, the Tabletop RPG one-shot group. Any others that come to mind on your end?
The RPG Brigade is a really good one.
Yeah. I don't see them running a lot of games particularly, but it is a good resource at least to meet people and talk about stuff.
Well, and that's actually where I got started in online gaming, was through BrigadeCon of 2015. It was the first time I'd ever run an online game, and played in one in the same night. So that was kind of my gateway drug, if you will. But
nice.
Yeah, and all of these groups, just to clarify, are on Facebook. Just
yes.
For people who may be listening and not aware of where these places are. But they're all very, very good groups with a lot of people running games or talking games or both, where you can kind of just watch for interest posts, which would be the next step. Is just kind of wait and see, what people post as far as interests for games go. But I would say a caveat to that is don't just wait in silence and then hop in and say that you're interested in playing in a game. Because some of these groups are so large with so many people, so many voices being thrown around, that I know for me at least, when I go to fill my games, I look for people who are already an established part of the community, not necessarily well known, quote unquote, but at least that I have seen around for a while. I don't know about you,
Absolutely,
Jeff.
and I would totally echo that sentiment. Like if you're new into one of these groups, or at least new to the idea of actually getting into some of the games, the first step before you even start to put posts up about playing in someone else's game or running your own game, I would absolutely agree with Jeremy. Start putting your voice out there. Like, respond to people's questions and topics and post topics of your own. Like, I am much more likely, if I put up an interest post, I am much more likely to pick somebody whose name I've seen over somebody whose name I've never seen. Even if I'm specifically going out of my way to pick a new player, I'll pick a new player that I recognize the name of over a new player that I've never seen in the group a single time.
Right. And a lot of that is not, for me at least, it's not elitism. It's not about, oh, I don't know that person, or, oh, they're not a part of our community. It's about, out of 4,000 users, for example, in the Absolute Tabletop group, how many of those are throwaway accounts or bots or, what have you? There's no way of really knowing. Or if you've never seen anybody post, this particular person who's posting interest in your game, if you've never seen them post, you have no way of knowing if there's going to be any chemistry between you. If the things that you like in games or what you're looking for in a game are even remotely similar. And while many people, and while many people may argue that that's not important, I would have to respectfully disagree. Chemistry is a huge part of making a game run smoothly.
No, I would definitely agree with that. Game style, I think, plays a big part in how well a game goes. As far as, are the players all on the same page? So if I put up a game, let's say I put up an interest post and it's for like a historical, realistic, gritty game, like set in like Earth, like medieval England or something like that. And it's going to be like bloody and messy, and serious. If I've seen somebody comment on a post about how they like gritty, realistic games and they like serious roleplay, like, even if I've never played with them, I at least know that they're kind of on the same page. Whereas if you just pick somebody completely out of the dark, I won't go too much, but I have had bad experiences, not recently, but back when I first started running games, of, trying to run a serious game and somebody comes in with a joke character or like a chucklefuck character. And it's like, nothing against that style of play, again, do what makes you the most happy in the RPG game world. But if you try to bring that character to one of my games and it's a more serious game, chances are our play styles aren't going to work out, and I'm probably not going to pick you for games in the future because, you've kind of lost the trust of bringing the right type of character to the right type of game. But if I've seen somebody, again, talk about how they like that type of game, it makes it much easier for me to feel comfortable picking them into the game. So making your interests known, and your play style known, and your system preferences known, go a long way to putting your name in the community. And people will be much more likely to accept you into games or play in games that you post, if you do that. So that, I think, would be my first step recommendation. Just put your voice out in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it hedges expectations a little bit. And, kind of rolling with that, a great thing for people to post when they do post an interest post for a game is to put that in your interest post. I know that you had some things that you wanted to touch on about interest posts and what they should contain, but at the very least, I think, you should name things like system and how many players you want and when it's going to run and all of those kinds of basics. But at the same time, you should also kind of give a little bit of a hint as to what at least the tone or the style of the game is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And kind of going off of that, as far as interest posts go, there are a couple things that I think are critical to include. And you can agree or disagree. But basically, I have a very strict template that I use for my interest posts. Like, I have it written down, I have it recorded, and anytime I want to put up a game, I fill out the template according to the game. And I do that all the time, because that helps me to make sure I include all the elements that I think are important. It's actually something that I think hurts people who are trying to break into the community, newer players, especially newer game masters, is that they'll put up posts in the group that'll be like, hey, anybody want to play a 5e game set in this world? And then they won't get anybody, or like all the responses will be like people just asking like, when is this game going to happen? What's the concept of the game? How frequently is this going to play? Is this a one-shot or a campaign? And like, people will just kind of say like, oh, I'm just kind of trying to see if this is an intriguing concept, and I'll kind of work out the details from there. And it's like, in my experience, that's not really going to get you very far. Like, that game will never happen. So I think if you are going to run a game, and you've decided this is my time, I'm going to run a game, make sure that you have like the details of the game. Like, it's an important distinction, I think, to make between playing online and playing in a home group. Whereas the home group, you can kind of just work things out on the fly, of just like, hey, let's play a game. Like, I have this module, or I'm going to make up a homebrew campaign, and everyone can just be like, okay, yeah, let's play. Like, same day as we always play? Yeah, sure. But like, playing online is a much, I guess, stricter in the sense of like, you need to put when, where, what, how, all of that out there up front, because people need to know what they're committing to beforehand. So if you put up vague or ambiguous interest posts, those games will almost never fill and almost never happen. Whereas a game with a well-formulated interest post with specific details will fill almost all the time, I've seen.
Yeah. To me, D&D and games like it, role-playing games, I guess I should be more general. Role-playing games in general are very much, in my opinion, a hobby that is a prime example of you get out of it what you put in. So, in my experience at least, the more that you are willing to put in to this hobby, the more time that you're willing to spend, the more dedication that you're trying to give, the more investment that you bring to the table, whether it's virtual or in person, the more you end up getting out of it in the end.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that. Like, it's very much a hobby of, experience. Like you say, what you put in is what you get out. Like, and it's up to you to cultivate the type of experiences that you want to have. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite things about the online community is that you're able to cultivate a very specific experience with very specific people. Whereas kind of like true. In a home group, you're kind of locked into the people that you have available. And, maybe it's probably your friends or people that you have gathered up from a certain place. And, you may have to compromise a lot as far as, style or running a module versus a homebrew or what you allow or don't allow. Whereas in an online game, you can put exactly what you want to do as a player and as a GM. And you can really kind of bring those visions to life, I think, in a way that you can't do. Not that you can't do that offline, but it's rarer for it to happen offline.
Yeah, well, in online communities, especially like the ones that Jeff has mentioned, you're able to cast your net so much wider. So if you have this super niche system or super specific setting that you can't convince your regular group to play with you for whatever reason, it's too many rules, not enough rules, oh, I never watched that cartoon, so I wouldn't be interested in playing in that game, what have you. With an audience of 4,000 people, that's a lot of people that could possibly be interested in all of a sudden finding 4 that are willing to go out on that limb with you is much, much easier.
Exactly, yeah. And like, just as kind of an example of that phenomenon, like, I just ran a game on my channel not too long ago, called Blood Feud. And like, the concept of the game was like, literally, like, you're playing the sons of a lord in historic Anglo-Saxon Britain in like the 8th century, and you're trying to get revenge on a family that's wronged you. Where it's like, if I were to pitch that to my home group, like, there's no way in a million years people wait, I can't play any magic classes, I can't play any race other than humans, like, everyone's just got to be human fighters or human rogues and that's it. No, that's lame. I don't want to do that.
I definitely have to say that's pretty niche.
Yeah, exactly. It's very specific, and it's like you have to have some level of historic knowledge,
Right.
and also interested in that type of game. And it's like there's a lot of ifs that go into a game like that. But I fill that game with some great players because that's the type of game that they wanted to play in too. And it's like that's kind of exactly what I think we're both trying to say here. Is like
Exactly.
you have so many people that however weird or strange or niche your concept is, you can probably get people into it if you present it in a way that's appealing.
Yeah. So for online gaming, we've established like kind of where to go, the places to start your journey. And after this theoretical person has made their presence known in their community by posting their opinions on things, by commenting, by liking, by talking to people in private messages and otherwise, just kind of making the rounds and getting to know everybody. Now they've put up their interest post and they've made sure to include all the relevant information. They've made a form like maybe you've suggested, or they've copied and pasted somebody else's that felt complete to them. So now that they've accomplished all of that, what would you say is next for making an online game happen?
So if I could just real quick pull back one moment here, as far as
Absolutely.
the interest post things go, for people that are interested, I'll actually post my interest post template in the show notes or in the posts when we put this up. But I think just to highlight a couple of the things that you should include on that, at least baseline information. So looking at my template here, so just kind of working down it. So I'd have a title for the game, something kind of snappy that gets the point across of what you're trying to do. And then the system that you're using. And then a description of the concept of the game. So if you're, running a game that's going to be set in space put up a little paragraph of your ship floats on as suddenly warning lights flash and nobody can figure out why the ship, you figure you're going to need to land it and check out what's going on with the engine. So you land on this foreign planet and things start to get weird. Just a basic, you don't have to give away any spoilers or anything about the game itself, but it's just kind of some information that will let people latch on to the game. And then a couple of things, and some of the things that I see people most commonly leave out. The scope of the game, and what I mean by scope is is this a one-shot? Is this a trilogy? Is this a short campaign? Is this a long campaign? And if it's a campaign, how frequently are you playing? How many players you're going to have, what level they're going to start at, if it's a leveled system, or character creation information in general, depending on the system, what races and classes you're allowing. But most importantly, I think, is the day and time, which I think is something people often leave out because they want to try to cast a wider net, as you kind of pointed out before. But I think setting up an expectation for when a game will happen is probably the most often missed detail and probably one of the most important ones. I don't know about you, but I've seen posts up where somebody will post an interesting game, and they'll leave the time off of it. And that's the first thing everybody says is I'm interested depending on time. I might want to do this, but I'll need to know when it is. So and there's certainly a method of, pick your players first and then schedule the game after that. But I think even if you're going to do that, you need to make it very clear in the interest post. I will be picking players and then we will schedule a date as soon as possible with those players.
Yeah, and I have found in my personal experience that it's so much easier to schedule the time and the date for the game first and let that be the first thing that weeds out player choices. Because I've had games where I've picked the players first and just said, oh, we'll schedule a date. And most of the time, it ends up becoming a scheduling nightmare where the game can't happen for a month or more, after the initial interest post.
Yeah, if it even happens at all. I've had plenty
Absolutely.
of games where it's like, all right, I've picked, these are the 4 players I want. I'm super excited. Let's schedule a day. Does this day work? No, I can't do Saturdays. How about this? No, I can only play mornings on Tuesday. And then suddenly it's like, okay, 2 weeks from now, 3 weeks from now, a month from now. And then it gets so tedious and so difficult that it just never happens. Like, it gets too frustrating and people start to lose interest between kind of all the red tape of scheduling. Absolutely agree with you there. If you can, within reason, pick a day and a time first and put that in the interest post. This is happening on September 30th. It's a Friday. I don't know if it's actually a Friday. I just made that up. It's a Saturday. This is happening September 30th. It's a Saturday night at 5 p.m. Pacific. That is when the game is happening. If you cannot play at that time, do not sign up. And then once you get people in there, it's like immediately they're right on board. Like, this is when the game's happening. They can put it in their calendar way ahead of time, and there's no issues.
Yeah, and an addendum that I will put onto that is, if you do find yourself in need of trying to schedule players, I cannot recommend highly enough the doodle.com. That thing is phenomenal for organizing people. And it's free. You don't even have to actually register to use it. It's supreme.
Yeah, I'll put a link to that as well. And basically, for the people who don't know what that is, it's a website where basically you can set up a poll of dates. So you can say, like, here's 8 days that I can play, no questions asked.
Exactly.
Please fill out which of those days that you can play at, no questions asked. And then you can kind of narrow it down to specifically, okay, well, one person can make Saturday, 2 people can make Tuesday, but everybody can make Thursday. So that's when the game's going to happen.
Right. Yeah, it's perfect for this kind of stuff. Okay. So, now that this theoretical player has their interest post, unless there's anything else that you want to go over with your interest posts form.
I think there's not really too much else to say. Just, I cannot recommend highly enough. If you're not going to use my exact template, at least make one and make sure it has all the right information on it. Because, one thing that I did not mention, putting up pictures along with your interest post makes it vastly more likely that people will see it and be interested in it. Like, if you, like, it's one thing to see a big long text post, because interest posts are usually just huge blocks of information. And it's easy to kind of either scroll past it or not read it. But if you see let's say I'm putting up an interest post for like a Lord of the Rings game, like Adventures in Middle-earth, and the first thing you see is this giant picture of Sauron smashing people with his freaking giant mace. Like, that's going to be so much more engaging than I'm looking for people to play in Adventures in Middle-earth. Like, so that is a huge thing. Is incorporating pictures and art.
Is that a game that you're running, Jeff? Because if you are, I might know a player.
Are you interested? Live interest post right now.
Maybe. I think I'll settle for tackling the Witch King of Angmar.
Yeah, that was good times.
It's one of my all-time favorite role-playing game moments. But I will also add that on the other side of that, for interest posts, as a player, if you find yourself interested in something, don't just type and enter interested. Like, for me, that does not convey interest. It might contain the word interest, but it doesn't convey a very strong level of interest. Where, adversely, you have people who come in and post a character background with a character image. Like, to me, that's going to suck me in and say, that's the guy right there, or that's the girl right there for my game.
Yeah, that's a really good point actually, and something that I think that we should actually dwell on if we're on interest posts a little bit more is like the player side of interest posts. I think,
Sure.
like, as the GM, there's kind of like a standard art to it. You know, you fill in the template, you put up a picture, and people will say yes or no. But as far as being a player, so first of all, exactly what you said. If I put up an interest post and one person says interest and one person says, here's the name of the character, here's their background, here's a picture, and here's this well thought out thing tying him into your world, like, I'll pick the second person over the first person basically every single time, unless the person, like, hate to, like, admit to giving special treatment, but, like, unless that first person is, like, a dang phenomenal role player who I know and, like, have history with. As far as
Right.
picking two people I've never played with before, I will always give precedence to the person who, at the very least, is like, I'm super interested in this game, I'd love to play, I can make that time. And going all the way up into an actual formal concept is going to beat out interested every single time.
Yeah. To me, again, it's an example of you get out of it what you put in. If I see a player who has already shown me that they're invested in the very concept of the game I'm planning on running, especially if they can do something like tie their character background to the little bit of information that I leaked out about the setting, or they're already asking me questions about it, or they post a picture and I'm like, oh, this person gets the tone. They get the genre of what I'm trying to go for with this particular game. Then, wow. I don't know if you can hear that or not. But, yeah, if I can see that they're already giving investment to the game that I'm planning on running, then I am much, 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 much more likely to choose them as a player.
Yeah, just, again, showing the enthusiasm and interest for the game. It kind of goes along with, like, putting your voice out there of the type of game that you want to play, like we talked about earlier. Like, if you can show that that's the type of game that you want to be a part of and that you're willing to, like, create and put yourself into this world before you've even been picked for the game, it really does make a mark. And people notice those things when people do them. And one last side note I want to make, again, on the player side of interest posts, but this is just kind of more of a don't lose hope message. So, unfortunately, given the fact that most games will have only 4 players, some even only 2 or 3, not everyone can play in every game. And sometimes you'll have 15 people post interest on an interest post. And of course, the GM can only pick 4 of those people, which means 11 people are not going to be in that game. So, just something to keep in mind, especially if you're a new member of the community who has not played much games or has not put their voice out as much. Don't lose hope and don't lose heart if you're not picked for a game. Even if it's, like, when I first started getting into the online community, I'd say I'd maybe get picked for, like, 1 in 12 to 15 games. I don't know if you have a similar or not experience, Jeremy, but, like, I was constantly like, this game seems awesome, I want to be a part of it. Here's a character, nothing. And it's like, it can be really disheartening to go through that.
Yeah,
but,
and go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead. I was just going to say, but if you keep at it and keep showing enthusiasm, eventually you will get a chance. Like, it's just down to a matter of numbers. A lot of people in the community take pride in picking up new players and giving them a chance to play and seeing what they're made of. So, it's just something to keep in mind. If you don't get picked for a game, just try to keep in mind that at rock bottom, it is kind of a numbers game, a probability game. If you have 30 people, like if it's a game like Matt Click puts up, and you'll get like 75 people who post interest in it, like even phenomenal players are going to miss out on that game, just because of the numbers. Like, which I think is just an important thing to say that some people, I think, miss out on. is they'll go in
I
and
agree.
thinking like, oh, I'm finally ready. I've been working up the nerve to play online. I've been gathering my strength and fighting my anxiety, because I think there's a lot of us in the group that struggle with that kind of thing. It's like, I'm finally ready to play in a game. I'm interested. Here's my character. I'm so excited. And then they don't get picked. And it's like, it can be so frustrating to go through that. But you're not alone if that happens to you. I think basically everyone in this group has experienced that at some point.
For sure. It's definitely something that I went through in the beginning, and it's still something that I go through. I post interest in games a lot that I don't get chosen for. And it's just one of those things where you can't take it personally. You know, it's we are a group of people that are used to being picked last for dodgeball. You know, where it's kind of it's kind of a normal thing for our group, or at least for me and most of the friends that I've had. And it's kind of one of those things where you find a place like the Absolute Tabletop group or other gaming groups, and you're like, man, this place is awesome. These people, they not only understand my passion, my level of interest in these things, some of them go far above and beyond how far I'm willing to go. I've found a place where I belong. I've found a place where I fit in. And I think a lot of times people tend to take the not getting chosen as a rejection. And it's simply not the case. It's not that you're not good enough or that your interest post wasn't good enough. It could have been any myriad of factors that made the decision for the DM or the GM to choose or not choose you as one of the players in that game. But, like Jess said, keep posting interest. Keep talking to people. Keep commenting. Keep liking on things. Because there are people who are noticing. Even if it doesn't seem that way. If you continue to post interests in a lot of different games, and you go the extra distance, you don't have to go full-fledged roll up a character before you're ever even chosen. I definitely don't recommend that. But if you show that you're willing to invest, people are going to take notice. And if you show that you consistently are willing to invest, you will get chosen way sooner than later.
Exactly. And like, I can't tell you how many times, and I'm sure you've done exactly the same thing, where like, we'll put up an interest post and you'll just get like a couple of super solid players and some new people who will all post interest. And like, I'll pick, like, I've literally sat at some of my interest posts for like an hour, just staring at the list of names, just like, I have 9 people, I want to pick all of them, but I can't. What the heck do I do? And it's like, I've had so many people where it's like, okay, I can't work this person into my game this time, but I've seen them talking, I've seen them post, their concept was really cool, and I wish I could pick them, but I don't have the space. But next time I put a game up, if they put interest, I will absolutely pick them.
Yep. Yeah, there's definitely that. I mean, like, full confession time, like, I make Excel spreadsheets. Like, I put, okay, this is the character race, the character class that they proposed, you know, this is what I've seen them show interest in, or, you know, oh, this person is a really good, improver, or this person really brings it whenever it's time for playing the game, things like that, and it helps me make my decision.
Yeah, and I mean, I can't quite say that I have like an Excel sheet of everybody in the group ready at my fingertips, but
I mean, per game, but yeah.
No, I know. I'm just giving you a hard time. Like, I know exactly what you're saying though, of like, again, like, when I put up the historical game post that I was talking about earlier, like, one of the people that was like, I'm interested, I want to play, like, they constantly run historical games and play in historical games and play in brutal, human-only, fighter-only games. So it's like, I knew I was going to pick them right off the bat because they're a phenomenal player and they have the exact same play style as me. And it's like, sometimes you'll just get 4 of those people who post interest. And it's like, I try to make time for new players when I can. Like, it's important to me to allow people into my game. But sometimes I'm just going to pick 4 people who I know are rock stars and want the same type of game that I want, because at the end of the day, like, this is for fun. And it's like, not to say that I won't have fun with a new player, but it kind of becomes a gambling decision of, it's like, well, I could take this great player who I know is going to be awesome and is going to make the game better, and I won't have to do anything to help them integrate. Or I can take a person I've never seen before, I've never played with before, and it's like, it's not a personal slight. It's just like, sometimes it's not going to work out.
Exactly. So, as we are rolling up on about an hour and 10 minutes, I think we should probably see about kind of making sure we hit some of the points that we want to about the topic.
Yes.
So, we've gone over interest posts and such with online games. And we've gone over not only making interest posts, but also replying to interest posts as a DM and then as a player. So, if this theoretical game, this theoretical new person, has gone through all of these steps, and they've gotten the players who have said yes, and they've gotten everything arranged, what comes next for them to get started?
So the typical next step, the most common one that I have and that most people have, is the GM, which is going to be you if you're running the game, of course, will make an event in the group. So they'll set up a specific calendar day and time that everyone's going to play on, and they'll kind of put it on the calendar. But basically what this will also functions as, in addition to a calendar, is basically like a group meeting area. And some people will make a Facebook Messenger chat as well, where basically like the GM has picked the players that they want to be in the game based on the interest post process that we talked about. And then they will set up some form of communication, again, typically an event or a messenger chat or something like that, so people can start talking about getting deeper into the setting and deeper into the game, and deeper into kind of throwing around character concepts and
Exactly.
building up the world going into the game. It's pretty rare, I think, that you'll see an interest post go straight to game without some sort of meeting place arranged.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even more than just getting on the same page as far as the setting and character concepts and stuff, it also goes a long way towards developing a little bit of group cohesion with the players, not just with the characters.
Yeah, exactly. Like when you start people can start kind of throwing around jokes and getting to know each other in like the chats and the event pages, and it kind of goes a long way to go from like, this is a people I've never talked with before. And once you kind of start actually into the game, you kind of know people. You don't know them on a deep level, but you kind of know what you're getting into.
Right.
And it, like you said, it helps a lot with group cohesion, both in and out of character, because you have this kind of expectation built up as far as who you're playing with, if you don't already know them.
And I've also found that it also goes a long way towards helping relationships outside of that game itself. You know, each of those players and that DM, if you're not the one running the game, after the game are going to have an impression of you, both as a player whenever it came time to run the game, but also just their interaction with you in general, outside of the game. And if you leave those people, those players and that GM with a positive interaction, you know, you were pleasant to deal with, you were accommodating, you were helpful and friendly, and quick to respond. These are all things that in the future, whenever you post an interest in playing in some of these people's games, they're going to be more likely to pick you.
Exactly, and it also just goes a long way towards like making friends in the group, and it's like that'll go a long way towards making your gaming that much better. Like, I think most of the people in the Absolute Tabletop Games group specifically, because that's basically exclusively where I do my online gaming. Like, a lot of the people that I would say that I'm friends with, a lot of that comes more from like the pre-game chats and like the post-game hanging out and chatting than it does like the actual game itself. So like, exactly like you said, making yourself known in the group chat and being engaging and interesting and though talking about the game and talking about each other and getting people excited. Like just to kind of put out an example specifically of how much it can help, like Alan Holloway, great GM. His channel is Check for Traps. So. I definitely recommend him. He ran a Ninja Turtles game, and he set up a chat for that game, and Chad Nick, one of the players, was like off the wall excited about Ninja Turtles. Like he was a freaking fanatic, and like his excitement in that chat going into the game, like I was totally building up hype off of how excited he was. Like it made a marked difference in going into that game of like seeing him like, I love Ninja Turtles. This is going to be great. Here's the character. Like I'm going to play Leonardo. It's going to be super awesome. Like I can't wait. And it was like some like in character kind of jabs between some of the people. Like, and it's like that made that game so much more like immediately exciting. Like,
right.
There was no kind of trying to feel out the environment of the group. There was no like, okay, well, we're kind of starting, but we don't really know how this is going to work. It was just immediately immersion in character, awesome, because we had built up that sense of the game going in.
Yeah, exactly. You established this rapport, and it instead of kind of dipping your toe into the water, with that game, we just cannonballed straight in, and it was a perfect fit for that game in particular.
Yeah, exactly. So I guess once you've got this event page started, or this perhaps even this Facebook chat arranged, what would you say is kind of the next part that goes into the game?
Well, from then on, I think it's pretty much kind of a universal thing to running games in any fashion. You've got to get your shit together. Whether you're a light prep or a no prep kind of GM, or whether you're the kind of person that is very meticulous in their planning stages, you got to get all that done before you can actually run the game. And in addition to making sure that you have all of that squared away, you've also got the logistical side of things. So you've got to make sure that you either have, a YouTube channel if you're going to be broadcasting and recording the game, or that you at least kind of have a decent grasp of how Hangouts works, or Roll20, or wherever it is that you're going to be running this game. You kind of have to know how to spin the wheels, if you were, because you don't want to spend time during your game having to deal with all of that. It's very distracting. So it's definitely something you should... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going to echo exactly what you were saying. Like, it's so important that, like, as a GM and as a player alike, that you have what you need ready when the game is going to start. Like, I've actually had a game where we started like 45 minutes late because one of the players didn't have their character ready and they had to roll it up.
Yeah.
And it was like eating into the time before we were playing, and it's like that can totally bite at the mood of the game and the feel of the group.
For sure.
To have that. So like once the game is it's nearing the game, it's game day going in, like you need to make sure that you have a microphone that works, that you have a camera that works if you're using webcams, that you have your character sheet that's filled out, or if you're the GM, that you have the session in mind going in of what you're trying to do. Because again, like you say, every minute spent trying to fix tech issues or iron out character details during actual game time, like it can be such a huge impactor on like the enjoyment of the game and the flow of the game, if you're trying to figure that stuff out during the gameplay.
Absolutely. And for me, I think, again, it speaks volumes about your investment level as a player. If you're excited about the game, then chances are, and as long as it's not one of those games where you put your character together at the beginning on purpose, if you've put your character together previously, that shows that you're taking it seriously, that you are excited about the game, as opposed to showing up and being that person, oh, I didn't bring any dice, or oh, I didn't bring a pencil, or oh, my character's not rolled up, etc.
Exactly. It makes such a big difference and such a big impression on you as a player. If I went into a game and I picked a new player I never played with, and they came in with any of those issues that you mentioned, not having a character, not having supplies, not being ready, like the chance that I'm going to pick them for any future games, if I'm just being totally honest, drops massively if that happens. And for all we can talk about, keep trying to get in games and you will, and that's absolutely true. Unfortunately, bad impressions travel quickly and they stick hard. So it's important. I can't stress enough how important it is to have those details ready going into it, because I would hate for that to be a sticking point for someone's involvement in an online community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's an unfortunate truth. And one thing that I do want to say, and this is kind of a universal tip, in my opinion, as a player, is have scratch paper. Whether that is a virtual scratch paper in the way of like a notepad program or a Word document or a physical notepad or just index cards or whatever. As a player, I think that is also a piece of necessary equipment. Your DM or GM likely has spent quite a bit of time coming up with these story bits, and they're going to dole them out to you. The least that you can do as a player is jot down notes so that later you can reference the stuff that they've already established. And if you want to talk about something that helps group cohesion and story cohesion, that's the best way to do it right there, in my opinion. As opposed to being, what was the name of the dwarven merchant guy? I don't know, whatever his name was. Instead you can look at your notes. Go ahead.
At the very least, write down the other player characters' names.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree. That's something that I have started doing in the recent past here, and it has helped me immensely as a player.
Yeah, I can't tell you how much it helps immersion and engagement in the game to have everybody always refer to each other's names. It's not and then I say to Jeremy's character that it's such a big tool for engagement, and again it shows that you're interested in the world and the game. And it just speeds up the process a lot if you have the information on hand going into it, rather than having to ask and remind and take, it may only take 10 seconds to get that fixed, but that's a break in the game that didn't need to happen. And those breaks can matter.
Absolutely, yeah. That's the kind of disruption of the immersion that tends to have ripples, at least going out for a little while. In the game. Okay. So
kind of moving again, kind of moving away from that point here. I know we also wanted to talk a little bit about session zeros.
Mm-hmm.
So if you had to give me the pitch here real quick, I'm on board with session zeros, but for the listeners here, what's the pitch? Why a session zero? Well, first, what is a session zero, and then why is it important?
So, a session zero is a time typically when the group gets together for the first time. It's the place where you kind of sit down together at the table, virtually or in person, and you say, okay, what are we wanting to play? It's where you kind of establish not only the system and the setting of what you're going to be playing, if those things haven't been established already, but it's where you discuss things like tone, length of play, level of chucklefuckery versus level of realism or seriousness, versus or in addition you would also be talking about things like potential triggers. I'm not a huge fan of the word triggers, but it's a real thing for several people out there who there's certain topics that they cannot or don't like to approach in gaming. And knowing all of those kinds of things ahead of time are important. Session zeros are also a great place to kind of, as a DM, kind of lay out what your expectations are from your players. And vice versa. You know, how much role-playing you're wanting, how much combat you're wanting, how much puzzle solving or riddles. All of those kinds of things are usually things you want to lay out as groundwork, as a foundation, if you will, in session zeros. Do you have anything that I missed that you might want to add?
So I guess just one thing to stress is I cannot possibly stress how important it is for expectations going into the game to be set, especially for a campaign. Like one-shots, you can kind of just, if something goes weird, you can kind of brush it off and no one has to deal with it again. But especially for campaigns, like, I'd say if I had to take a guess, I'd say if you look at like the issues that people have with groups or at tables or in specific games, at least like 90%, I'm willing to say, like I'm willing to put that down, are due to expectations not being said and being accidentally broken.
Yeah, for sure.
So like if you go into a game like Jeremy was saying, like, and like to make it real awful quick, like if you're going into a game and like, you know, graphic like sexual things are like immediately off the table for you. Like if you don't say that but going into it, like if that's gonna turn you off of the game, like you don't really get to then point the finger at the person responsible and say that they ruined the game if you never said it. Like people need to know, sure, this is where the lines are, this is what we want to do, this is what we don't want to do, this is what would make me like the game, this is what would make me dislike the game. Like having those expectations laid out, lines drawn in the sand, like that'll get rid of like the vast majority of problems that could arise.
I absolutely agree. In my home group, one of my players, who is fairly new to the group because she's a spouse of one of my longtime players, she has an aversion to particularly gory violence, even descriptions of gory violence. And it's something that in a lot of my games I tend to hit on, not because I'm a sadist or anything, but just because it invokes a visceral response from people when it's used, you know, appropriately. So there's definitely times where we start approaching a point when I know I'm going to have to give that kind of a description, and I will look at her and I'll say, okay, this might be a little graphic, so if you want to step out of the room for just a moment, or if you would rather me dull it down, then just let me know. And most of the time she's like, no, it's okay. You know, I'll be alright. But just that little bit of heads up seems to be oftentimes enough to let her prepare for what's coming and be okay with it.
Exactly. And just as much as it's important to draw no-go zones of like, no, I don't want to talk about rape or graphic violence or see like played out sexual scenes or things like that, it's also equally an opportunity to talk about what would make you super excited about the game. Like, I would love it if we could explore this type of tone, or I would love it if we could see this kind of character arc play out. And like, it gives an opportunity to present like just softballs to the DM, basically, of like, here's a list of things you could put in the game that would make me super excited. And you don't always have to give everything to the players exactly in the way that they want to, but it goes a long way towards, you know, if you know it, all it would take to make one player super happy is to drop in just this one detail about the world, then like it gives you so much more material to work off of.
I agree. For example, I like graphic sex scenes. No, I'm kidding. I'm not opposed to them.
Okay.
I'm sorry, it just seemed like a funny thing to say.
No, I got me. I was not ready for that.
But no, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. You know, and for me, it's almost as important, if not more important, than necessarily kind of listing the taboos is steering the game, the GM. That's where you kind of get your initial first ability to kind of put your spin on the game. Is when you come to the table and you say, you know, I have always wanted to do ship combat. Is there a way that we could possibly work that into this campaign? What you did is you just served the DM a massive hot plate of one entire session or more worth of material that he can or she can then draw upon, that they don't have to sit there in front of their computer or their notepad and scratch their head for an hour going, what the hell am I going to do next week? You know?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And one thing that I can't remember if you mentioned it or not, kind of going over Session 0, is this is also a great time for players and GMs to talk about the characters that are going to be involved in the story and creating characters that make sense in the world and make sense to travel with each other. That way you don't end up with like the infamous like forum post of like, my party has a lawful good holy paladin of ultimate righteousness and a tiefling warlock thief lawbreaker murderer in the same party and they can't get along and I think they're going to kill each other. What do I do? And it's like, what you do is you start ahead of in Session 0 before you actually start playing, and you say, well, this is the type of story that I generally would like to tell. So if we could tailor our characters to fit the theme and the story of the game, you don't have to make everybody perfect buddy, like super wonder friends, but
no,
it kind of gives you a baseline to work off of like, I would kind of like to explore what it's like to be a paladin in this story. Okay, well then, you know, you probably shouldn't also then include the tiefling murder hobo warlock in this game. Like, there's a time and a place for certain characters, and giving the players and the GM the time to create bonds between the characters and like, how do the characters know each other? Why are they traveling together? Who are they as people? What are they trying to accomplish in addition to the story goals? Like, Session 0 is the perfect time to flesh all those details out and really dig deep into the people who are going to be in the game, because that's ultimately going to be where the story lies. Like, the GM might have a storyline planned, but the characters are the ones that actually make the world come to life, and that gives a great time to build up what that environment's going to be like.
Absolutely. Yeah, if you have well-established relationships, then you have already done most of the legwork to having great role-playing. Great role-playing in a group is seeded in the relationships that your character has with other characters that are player characters, other characters that are NPCs, locations in the world, events in the world, organizations in the world. That's the meat and potatoes of role-playing, in my opinion.
I absolutely agree. Like, at least for me personally, like, the most satisfying moments in tabletop RPGs come from the interaction that the player characters have with each other or with the characters in the world. Like, cool combat encounters are awesome. Cool world building is awesome. And like, all of those things are super important to have, but a super cohesive and interactive party with reasons to travel with each other and reasons to conflict but not kill each other. Like, that for me is what brings the game to life and to the next level.
I agree. I think combat encounters and the world, the setting being well established and colorful are kind of like CGI special effects in movies. You want them there to facilitate and support the rest of what's going on. But you can't rely on them. And if you do, it's not that you can't. If you do rely on them, it's going to be a different kind of game. It's not going to be as emotionally rewarding. It might be more adrenaline-fueled and exciting to some degree, But I think when you walk away from the table and you're thinking about the game months, maybe even years later, most of that kind of stuff is not going to be what you're telling stories about.
Yeah, exactly. The stories are going to be about the moments that you had it as the characters, not like, oh, do you remember 15 years ago the description the GM gave of that room? Like, the description is very important, but like, it's not gonna be what binds the table together and what creates like the special moments like the characters are.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So, the session 0 is the perfect time for that, like you said. And a prime example is this, the last main campaign that I ran, White Lotus Black Jade, with my home group, ran for about 11 months. And it was the first time I'd ever done a session 0. But I knew that I wanted to have one because it was an Asian-themed game, which is one that my group has never played before. It's one that I've never run before. And it was a genre that I was new to. I had just started watching Asian cinema with gusto, probably about a year before starting the game. So I really wanted to have the opportunity to sit down and discuss these kinds of things. There was a mechanical addition to the game that I made, of 5th edition, that required some going over in detail because it was an integral part of the game. But one of the other things that I tried for the first time was establishing, like you said, relationships. Not only connections between the PCs, but also with NPCs. And then, furthermore, I required each one of them to give me a secret. It didn't have to be something that was huge. It didn't have to be something that was even a thing that their character was aware of. It's just something that I wanted them, as a player, to give to me as a DM, essentially kind of like a trouble in Fate, where it's, I'm giving you permission to fuck with me by using this particular piece of information. If that makes sense. And
yeah, exactly. Like it gives you those opportunities to like dig deeper in ways that you might normally be able to do.
Put me in an awkward situation, role-playing wise. Make me have to back me into a corner and make me have to figure out a way to get out of it. That kind of stuff is fun as a player to have to work with. But it was a roaring success, and I think without a session 0, it probably would have fallen flat on its face. So I think session 0 is, like you said, for a one-shot, it's probably overkill, but for a campaign, I think it's essential.
Absolutely. At this point, I don't think I would ever run a campaign without a session 0. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it has to be like everybody's in a video call talking, though I prefer that to be the case. But at the very least, like, for campaigns that I run, I'll make a Facebook group where everyone can post and, like, basically, like, you can iron out a lot of the questions and details there. Now, again, I prefer to have everybody in a call together with each other to talk in person, quote unquote. But yeah, I would never run a campaign without doing a session 0 at this point. Like, it's so valuable.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm in the same boat. And, one of the things that we hadn't touched on as far as session 0s go is that that's a great place to establish what a lot of people refer to as a social contract. And we've kind of gone over what a social contract is, but we hadn't really defined it as such. And the social contract is kind of a lot of what we've already said about listing the things that excite you, listing the things that you'd rather not go through at a role-playing game, things that you want to avoid in general, how much you like combat, how much you like role-playing. All of those kinds of things are a social contract. Chiefly of which is, I think, Wheaton's golden rule, I think is what they call it, which is don't be a dick. That should be a rule for it should be a rule for life in general, but a lot of people don't practice that. But at the very least, in a gaming situation, you really should practice that. Your character can be a dick. That's fine. Don't don't use your character as an excuse to be a dick out of character, if that makes sense. I see a lot of people do that.
Yeah, and yeah, basically, like, exactly what you're saying is, like, it sets up a place for you to kind of establish, like, the more mundane rules that you'd rather not go over during the actual game itself. It's just like, you know, again, like you say, in character you can do whatever you want to, but out of character always be respectful. Or, like, just want to remind everybody, confirming that the interest post said this is going to be every Wednesday night at 6. We're going to do bi-weekly Wednesday nights, every other week campaign. That's happening. Everybody's still okay with that. Let's confirm that that is an okay time for everybody to play. And, like, it lets you set up those rules of confirming when the game is taking place and what's going to be allowed at the table, what's not, and so on.
Exactly. So, as far as playing in person goes, which Session Zero is not limited to in-person play. You can absolutely do that virtually, and I have done so, and it's helped quite a bit with Ashes of Heaven. I think it's the only time that I've held one so far. Mm-hmm. But speaking particularly about getting started in gaming offline, you've gathered your group of friends. You have your materials prepared. You have had your Session Zero. You have rolled up characters. You have connections. You have relationships established. Secrets, if you're doing that kind of thing. You've got dice, pencils, snacks, whatever. And you're ready to rock and roll. What else are you lacking before you can get started? Is there anything else?
Yeah, and kind of going along with that as well for in-person games, like, kind of transitioning from, like, we're friends who have met up hanging out to, like, actually getting into the game. Kind of being able to draw that line of, like, okay, we're getting ready to start. We're no longer just hanging out talking. We're now in game. Kind of creating an attitude shift just as much as a like, equipment setup.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that I don't do in my home groups, and it's not because it's not necessary. It's probably a very necessary thing. It's just that when we sit down and play, we usually sit down for a lengthy period of time, and because we see each other on a weekly basis, usually, the socialization is it's not as obtrusive as I think it is in a group that meets, like, say, monthly.
Yeah.
So, you know, we talk about the latest episode of whatever show happens to be running at that time. Oh, did you guys hear that they're doing this or that? Or, oh, hey, Wizards of the Coast is putting out another book. Yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. And then there's just kind of a general shift, like you said. It's just kind of an anticipated or expected thing that when the DM kind of gets a certain look or a certain body posture or clears their throat or starts the music or what have you, that it's time to put the social stuff kind of on the back burner. And it's not that it doesn't still happen throughout the evening. It's just it becomes the secondary focus. But I think having a hard, fast switch is a great idea. And I think it's something that I've heard Barker in particular talk about before with a lot of his games.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to be anything crazy. Like, it could just be as simple as, all right, guys, you ready to start? Like, like, it doesn't have to be any dramatic or extreme thing. Like, it's just, but, like, having, like, a moment where it's like, okay, now we're, yeah.
You gotta set off pyrotechnics.
We'll start the opening ceremonies in 5 minutes. Please, everybody, take your seats. The music will begin shortly. We'll have a short fireworks show to open, and then the description will start. That's how I open my home games. We have pyrotechnics and fireworks, and it's really a whole event. You'd have to be there. It's
Sure. Yeah, I'm still waiting for my invitation.
I mean, in all honesty, I actually don't play. I don't have any in-person games at all. I haven't played in person in years. So I can't speak as well to the in-person things. But I think kind of the online, it kind of applies just as equally to online as well. And I think something that helps online is if the game is being broadcasted, the switch from being not live to live is obviously like a huge indicator of like everybody's kind of gathered into the hangout, chatting, having a good time, just socializing, and then like, okay, we're gonna go live. Like that's immediately like game time. Like that was no longer the time to talk about random things or about the movie you saw. Like now is the time for playing. And you can be a little bit more lax with that, obviously, in a home group, especially if it's a home group of close friends.
Definitely. Yeah, and I think a large part of that has to do with when you're playing online, it's kind of understood, or at least it seems to be for the most part, that you take the most of, at least, the out-of-character stuff to the chat box. Do it there. And that, I mean, I'm sure you can attest to, that's where I do my cut-up. That's where I, make jokes and levity and talk about, other things and whatnot. I'm still very much paying attention to the game.
Of course.
But that's where I let all of that levity go.
No, and I'm exactly the same way. And it's like, it's actually, it's pretty stunning how like different the chat experience can be from the game experience. Like, I remember specifically, I was playing in a Call of Cthulhu game where like the game itself was like dead tense. Like you could hear pin drop. Everyone's on the edge of their seat, like totally engaged in what's happening. But the side chat was just literally just like a constant stream of jokes. And being able to separate that out takes a little bit of practice, but like it's pretty standard fare for an online game.
Oh yeah. Yeah, it's great because when you watch those videos, you're watching people down on the bottom who are not directly involved in the scene or whatever, and they're cracking up laughing and stuff. You're like, damn, these people are psychotic. Like,
yeah,
because you don't have the context of what's going on in chat.
Exactly. But then once they unmute their microphone to speak, suddenly it's boom, like back into the world.
Exactly. But at a home game,
kind of yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna kind of do a lateral change here. So if you have something more to add to that, go ahead before I do that.
So what I was going to say is the downside is that in a home game in person is you don't have a separate chat window. So all of that side conversation is happening simultaneously with what's going on in character or in game. And I think that for me, at least at my table, that kind of thing is okay as long as you are making it as unobtrusive as possible, that you're whispering between each other. That you're showing each other stuff on your phone, but it's not played with volume. So that way the person that the GM is engaging directly with doesn't have to talk over you.
Yeah, exactly. There's a huge difference between like whispering a funny comment to the person sitting next to you and like halting the game to say something off topic. Like, the amount of acceptability is going to vary table to table there, but it's something to feel out. I mean, is breaking the game to bring up a side conversation or make a joke or show a funny picture or something like that. Is that okay?
Yeah, perhaps even something to go over in session 0.
Exactly. Yeah.
So bringing it back to the lateral jump that you were trying to make before I stalled you.
No, basically, I was just kind of moving in the online world. So we've kind of talked about getting started as far as interest posts and leading up to the game, and session 0s. But as far as actually the process of getting the actual game started, I think for people who have not been involved, it could be kind of a weird process. So I think we should probably go over kind of what to expect. Like you've gone over your session, you've done all your messenger chat and your event page chat, but now it's like 30 minutes before the game and you're getting ready to actually start a broadcasted game. Like, what would you say is kind of the process of going from we're in this messenger chat to actually playing the game?
For me, I think the first thing that probably needs to be said is probably the most imperative thing to do in that moment is to chill the fuck out. Like, honestly, it's the nerves, the jitters, the butterflies in your stomach, whatever you want to call it, it's normal. I've heard so many people talk about it and say that that's the thing that stops them in their tracks. And it happens to most everybody that I know. I was an actor. I was in theater, stage acting for 4 years in high school and in college, and standing in the wings, the side of the stage, waiting to go out, is probably one of the most nerve-wracking experiences that I've ever had in my life, because I am a socially awkward person. And it's just one of those things where you have to understand that psychologically, that moment is the most difficult moment. It's not the playing the game that's the most difficult. It's not the, am I going to do a good enough job? Or is this going to be fun enough? Or whatever else may be going through your head. It's just that moment that's the hardest. And all that you have to do is push yourself through that one moment, and the rest is a cakewalk, comparatively. At least that's the way it works for me.
No, I'm exactly the same way, and I have no problem admitting that. Like, I've played in dozens, if not hundreds, of games at this point, and I've run dozens of games, and I still get anxious and before every single game that I play, especially a game that I'm going to be GMing. Like,
oh, yeah.
It's just a constant factor, and similar to you. Like, I wasn't an actor, but I've been a musician, so I've performed in front of audiences, and I've done shows, and I've done solos and improvisation in front of audiences, and it's like, all that aside, I still get nervous before every single game. Like, so if you have those feelings of doubt or of anxiety or stress going into a game, understand, as Jeremy said, basically everybody has that. Like, it's not just you. And I mean, that doesn't even go just for me or you. Like, I've seen plenty of videos of like Matt Click talking about how he gets completely anxious and nervous before any game that he runs. And it's like, it's a totally normal part of the gaming experience. And just like you said, for me, the instant the game starts, the instant the DM starts narrating, that feeling washes away.
Yeah.
At least for me. Now, it may linger on for a couple minutes, but like you said, that's going to be the most difficult part on the emotional preparation side, is that kind of hour before the game moment.
You know what I have found? The transition for me in a game, whether I'm running it or playing, is the moment that I give in to having fun. The moment that I stop concerning myself with what could go wrong, and I start focusing on the fun that I am having. I tell myself, okay, if it goes wrong, it goes wrong. If it all goes down in flames, so be it. But for now, I'm in this moment, and I'm going to live this up as much as I can. And I'm going to throw myself to the wind and hope that it all turns out. And it always, for me, in that moment is when it stops being I stop being anxious.
Yeah, and so something for me is that this is kind of wandering away from the topic, but I think it's important enough to say. What I do that almost always helps me. So typically, at least for me, everybody's experience with anxiety and stage fright, if you want to call it that, is different. But for me, the feelings are almost always directed inwards towards myself. Like, what if I don't do good enough? What if I mess up? What if I'm not, interactive enough? Things like that. What I find helps me a lot is try to focus on pitching the other characters in the game. Direct that attention away from yourself and onto somebody else. Like, for me, like, the moment that I get involved in the game is often, like, a situation sets up another player to do something really cool, and I get excited by what they do or what they say. And, like, for me, that's immediately when that feeling washes away. So, like, let yourself become invested in the other people in the group and try to make them look good, and that'll almost always make you look good too.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's a good general rule of thumb, in my opinion, anyways, is look for places where you can help other people or where you can help the DM shine.
Exactly.
Look for ways that you can pitch that ball back to people. And, if you're playing with good people, they'll do the same thing for you.
Exactly.
Well,
yeah. So I guess just as far as like the technical details of getting started, just to kind of close in, it'll only take a minute here. So typically, if you've never done it before, the GM will typically send out a Hangout link or whatever format you're using, Discord link, Skype call, anything. About anywhere between, I've seen DMs do it as early as an hour before the game or as soon as 5 minutes before the game, but they'll typically send out a link to everybody.
Yep.
And then when you're ready and you have all your equipment set up and all your supplies and your character sheet and all that, hop in the Hangout, test all your tech equipment, make sure your mic works, make sure your camera works, make sure your overlay's up if you use an overlay, all that. Take a couple minutes to socialize, talk with the people, get to know them if you don't know them, or hang out if it's friends. And then, especially if it's a broadcast game, the GM will typically kind of gather and say, okay, is everybody ready to start? And they'll usually go over, if you're a player, the GM will typically say like, okay, I'm going to do a short intro. We're going to introduce everybody's channels and characters, and then we'll start. Or like, I'm not going to start with any intros. We're going to get right into the game as soon as the broadcast goes live. Kind of prep the players in the game. So if you're GMing a game, it's important to kind of set that scene of how the transition from organizing players to playing the game is actually going to go. And then from there, it's just as simple as hitting record or broadcast if it's a Hangout on air, which is the most common way that people play. And then going right into it.
Pretty much it. And in playing in person, it's not wholly dissimilar. Obviously, there's no hitting a button or things. Well, usually, I'm sure there are instances where that's the case. But yeah, it's you gather at whatever place that has been agreed upon. Be punctual. Be early if you can. D&D game is not timed to be fashionably late.
Yes.
Make sure you're prepared. Have your stuff with you. If you bring snacks, bring enough for the whole table. Like, that's kind of a common courtesy thing. If you're gonna do a meal together, depending on what time of day it happens, etc., make sure that that's kind of a known thing ahead of time, whether you should bring your own or whether you should bring cash for ordering pizza or whatever. Make sure all of that's kind of established ahead of time. And when it's game time, make sure that you're attentive. If you are the kind of person that can mess around on your phone and still pay attention, then okay, that's fine. But if it's distracting to you, then be realistic with yourself and put it down. I think you'll find that your enjoyment of the game is going to be infinitely better if your phone is not pressed up against your face for most of it. But as we are closing in on 2 hours, I think we should probably go ahead and look for a point to kind of roll this up. So unfortunately, we don't have any questions that we can take from our listeners.
Yeah.
Because we have very lazy
I guess
listeners. Just
Yeah, I mean, we definitely put out the information and people just didn't respond.
Exactly.
No, I mean,
that's how it went down. I'm telling you.
Yeah, it definitely 100%. There's no way that we would lie about that. No, but that is something that we can look into doing if that's something that people would be interested in. I'm not. We'll just kind of have to see and play that by ear.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
I guess as far as we covered a decent bit of ground there. But if you had to just kind of do a super short, getting started summary, what would you kind of say?
So like a too long didn't listen?
Exactly. At the end, of course, so that they have to listen to hear it.
Exactly.
But, yeah, just kind of try to tie up kind of what we went over into kind of a little bit more of a bite-sized message.
Okay. So, yeah, kind of short package here. Getting started. We'll go with online first. Get involved in some of these online communities, some of the ones that we've mentioned. Head over there, scope it out, see if it's the kind of thing that you'd be interested in. If it is, make yourself known. Talk to people, comment, like, make posts about gaming-related things, etc. Find interest posts that you are interested in, and delve in. Don't just give just a little surface-level interested post. Give it some thought, give it some investment, and eventually you'll find your way into playing in games. And when you are accepted, just make sure that you're the kind of person that you would want to have at your own table. Be prepared. Be invested in what's going on. Read a reasonable amount of whatever it is that the GM sends to you, and use it. Take pieces of it and incorporate it into your character. Incorporate it into what you do in the game. Be punctual whenever it comes time to being in the game. And beforehand, make sure that you're accessible, that you're attentive to what's going on, and that you respond quickly, and be friendly, and be courteous to people. And then, whenever game time comes, just, make sure that you're invested in what's going on, even whenever it's not your turn. And again, just be the kind of person that you would want to hang out with. So I think that pretty much sums it up as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I mean, just the one thing that I'll say, I've said it in every group, every person that I've talked to 1,000 times, whether it's your interest post or your session 0 or your home group, set up your expectations for what you want to happen so you can work towards that vision. It is so important. That'll get you 95% of the way there on whatever you're trying to do. If your interest post conveys the tone of the game and what you want to do, or your session 0 brings up those topics, it builds you a vision that you can then put into reality. And it's so crucial.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. All right, Jeff.
I think that'll pretty much do it for us here. I mean, we've gone about twice the time that we originally talked about doing. So that might be a point of improvement that we can start off with is,
Sure.
We both like to talk, and there's nothing wrong with that, but wow, we like to talk.
But hey, man, we're just getting started,
Yeah. Hey, there we go.
Hey.
Just getting started.
So
yes, again, this was the Dudes of Yore podcast, episode 1, getting started. If you liked this, go ahead and follow it. We'd love to hear any feedback. We're both very accepting of criticism, hopefully constructively. But we would love to hear people's thoughts, what they liked, questions that they have, what they think we could do better, anything like that.
Yeah, topics you'd like to hear us discuss.
Oh, yeah,
just
topics
anything
that you'd like would be awesome.
Yeah, or just get in touch and say hi. I'm even okay with that kind of stuff.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you, whatever it is that you have to say. If it's hateful or otherwise mean, direct it please towards Jeremy. He is the official criticism acceptor. Direct your compliments and niceties towards myself. I am the official compliment acceptor. which we've definitely discussed beforehand and are putting into official rules.
I will let all of you listeners determine whether or not this is a healthy relationship.
Alrighty, well, I think we should probably get this wrapped up here this time. Something that I think would be fun. I haven't pitched this to Jeremy at all yet. So typically podcasts like this will have like a specific like closing line, like a snazzy outro. I think instead of having like trying to come up with one specific one that we say every single time, we should just like improv a snazzy closing every time.
Okay.
And of course, because I'm the one who brought this up, clearly Jeremy is going to be the one who's going to close us out with a snazzy line. Take it away.
So I had to open with a joke on the spot, and now I've got to close with a snappy one-liner. Okay, so let's see here. Okay. The gears are turning. There's something in there.
Just say something ridiculous. It doesn't have to make sense.
Okay, here we go. And that is how it all got started.
That is how it all got started. The end.
I don't know if that's snazzy enough or not, but
we'll make it work.
Just add some reverb to it. It'll be great.
With any luck, something about what you have just listened to was both informative and entertaining. Be sure, if you're interested, to get in touch with us. You can find Jeremy Lilley on his YouTube channel, The Erasmas Expeditions, and Jeff Doty can be found on his YouTube channel, Encounterbalance. I guess that just about wraps it up. Well, oh, right. This is but one of many grand tales, Trevor. The coin in the hat is much appreciated. We will return with further stories and advice for your listening pleasure. But be sure to return when you pass through here again, and the road has worn you down. The next round is on us.